Night had fallen over the town of Lavender and people all throughout the town were just beginning to turn into their homes and retire to bed for the night. The time was just a little past midnight and on this particular night, the moon was out in all of its full and bright glory, adding an air of mystique and suspense to the night of great tribulation that was about to take place in just a short time ahead. Ash, flanked by his friends as well as Fuji and Agatha, was currently making his way through the abandoned portion of Lavender Town towards Pokémon Tower, heading out to face a challenge and a foe far above himself, which was set to change not only his outlook on life as he knew it but also fundamentally flip everything Ash thought he knew about how life was supposed to be upside down on its head. As hard as he tried, the young Ketchum could only fall in and out of twilight sleep the entire time he had been lying down. So on edge was his nerves and stressed out was his mind for the dangerous mission he had assigned himself to. Wheels were in motion and his plan was already beginning to take form, so Ash knew there was no backing out now. He had to see this entire thing through to the end, but it still didn't help matters any to calm his nerves. Looking back at his friends, he could see the same trepidation he felt being reflected upon their visages, and looking further back still, he could even see Fuji and Agatha with serious, completely focused expressions on their faces. Pikachu himself also looked to be unshakably focused on the task at hand, as his eyes had not left the direction the tower was in ever since they left Fuji's home. While Ash walked down one of the main streets that led to Pokémon Tower, only partially noticing the grass growing up through the cracks of the pavement, he had time to really think about what was going to happen and only pray that this what Arceus wanted him to do and would be by their side the entire time, because otherwise, things were not going to end pretty for he and his companions. After what seemed like hours but was really only 15 minutes, Ash finally found himself looking up at the daunting monolith that was Pokémon Tower, stretching high up into the dark night sky like a cruel trickster just waiting to invite unsuspecting victims into its house of cruel tricks and games. Looking back at the people with him, Ash took a deep breath and nodded before facing the door in front of him. Reaching out with both hands, Ash removed the broken chains from the handles and pushed the door open, glad the lock had been broken the night before when he first came here. As the doors swung open and revealed the eerie interior of the ground floor within, Ash took a moment to look at his surroundings, checking out the walls, ceiling and everything else nearby just to make sure Ghastly, Hunter or Gengar wasn't waiting to ambush them as soon as they stepped inside. Realizing that he wouldn't know until he was actually in the building, Ash walked inside, followed slowly by the others. As he adjusted to the dim surroundings around him, he was able to take in just how much of a disarray the tower had fallen into. The marble floors were cracked and dull in places, the walls and high ceiling far above were faded and also cracked in some places. Dust had accumulated on practically everything in the massive room over the many years, with no one to keep things clean, so that almost all of it was now covered in a hazy sheen of grime and filth. The memorial headstones that were scattered throughout the ground floor were nearly completely faded, so no distinguishable writing or markings could hardly be seen on them at all, and a few were even missing some chunks out of their surfaces. As Ash and his friends took in the run-down appearance of the tower's main floor, Agatha and Fuji just remained silent as they quietly observed everything around them, lost in thought while remembering what the tower used to look like long before its current desolate, dilapidated appearance took over. Ash wandered towards the middle of the room and looked down. The sight that greeted him was one of which sent both a shiver up his spine and also caused a feeling of great sorrow to permeate within him. What he saw while looking down was what appeared to be very faint, yet still clearly visible markings of blood stains on the floor below his feet. The dull red streaks had obviously been scrubbed and cleaned on as much as whoever did it possibly could, but Ash could still see it, especially with the way the moon was shining down on the spot from one of the large windows above and caused it to become quite visible to the naked eye. Knowing all about the people that had been killed at this very spot years ago by Team Rocket because of the story Fuji told, Ash slowly backed away as the shiver he felt remained on the back of his neck in the form of raised hairs. Looking back, he could see that Fuji was purposefully looking away, obviously not wanting to look at the area and be reminded of the day so much had been taken from him. Not remembering much about the night he was here since he had been pretty much completely entranced, Ash asked the older man, "Mr. Fuji, which way are we supposed to go in order to get to where we were last night?" Fuji seemed fortunate for the chance to focus on something else and quickly answered Ash as he walked over to his side, "We go that way, young man." He pointed towards the far end of the room where the archway that lead down into the catacombs was located. It's quite dark down there, so just let me get one of my light tags out so we'll be able to see. And Ash stopped him. No, that's okay Mr. Fuji, I've got a Pokémon on me now that will provide all the light we need. The old man just nodded and stood back while Ash grabbed a Pokeball from his side and threw it to the ground. Out of the ball burst forth Charmander in a bright sparkle of lights as he called out energetically, "Charmander Char." Fuji smiled. Ah yes, I remember that feisty little Charmander from our battle Ash. Excellent choice as well, its tail flame should be more than enough to light the way for us all. Ash nodded and looked down at his Pokémon. We need you to be our light source buddy, think you can handle that? Charmander threw his arms out and sounded off with an affirmative, Charmander. Before turning around and walking across the expansive ground floor with Ash and the others following right behind him. Upon reaching the top of the stone steps that lead down into the dark catacombs below, Charmander increased the intensity of his tail flame until it was burning a bright orange and red color. Ash gave a nod of his head and then the fire type began descending down the steps carefully. The group of humans followed Charmander down the long flight of stone steps as the path took them deeper and deeper into the dark recesses of the earth. As they continued on, each of them were able to tell they were venturing further below the surface from the way the air became somewhat thinner, more musty smelling, damp and even cold due to the temperature drop being below ground caused. The more they walked, the more the stone walls and floor around them started to show a much greater change in appearance. The walls looked wet from the dampness of the moisture in the air and the ground below them looked similar, only with the added effect of wet smacking sounds being heard when they took a step on the stone floor. There was even what almost seemed to be a silent, heavy feeling in the space around them that could only be felt when one went underground, where all was deathly quiet and secluded away from the ever-bustling, ever-lively surface world. Feeling the air chill her bare arms, Misty shivered and spoke up while grabbing at her arms, "Brr. How could anything stand to live in someplace like this? It's freezing down here." Agatha snorted. "When you're made of shadows and darkness with a black heart, the cold just doesn't chill you like some would think, dear," the older woman said callously. Brock himself felt a slight shiver run down his spine. "Man, I don't know why, but I feel like, almost like an ominous presence is making itself known the further we go. It's almost like these shadows are coming alive." Ash interrupted. Brock simply nodded. Yeah, that's right. It's really creepy." They all fell into silence then and continued on through the dark tunnel they were following, Fuji occasionally giving Ash directions on which way to go when they came across a junction or fork in the winding, twisting path of the dank, eerie catacombs. As they went further and further into the bowls of the earth beneath the tower, a definite presence started to clearly make itself known by the way the shadows and darkness around them appeared to come alive and shift at different points. Some of the group would see things move out of the corner of their eyes while others still thought that they could feel something brushing up against or touching them every now and again. Though everyone was feeling it and wondering the same thing, Giselle fell victim to it the most as she saw something move in the shadows of a tunnel opposite the one they were following. Jumping in fright, she screamed and grabbed onto Ash's arm. "Over there!" the brunette cried out, causing everyone to spin around and look in the direction she was pointing. Charmander quickly swiveled around and fired off a spout of flames in the direction his trainer's girlfriend saw the movement in order to illuminate the area. When he did, all they could see was the yawning expanse of darkness stretching on for what seemed like forever in the tunnel Giselle was pointing towards and nothing else. The others turned to look at her then and she just continued to point while sputtering, But I saw something move. Right there, I swear." Fuji nodded sagely. "Do not fear that we think you are crazy, Miss Giselle, you most likely did indeed see something." He looked into the shadows around them with his eyes set into a piercing and ever-vigilant gaze. "Haunter's servants probably already know we're here and are just waiting to spring an ATTCK on us." He then looked back at everyone. "Be on your guard, all of you." Seeing his friends nod in understanding, Ash turned back around with Giselle closer to him this time and started moving forward once more, now much more cautious and aware than he had been even before. Watching for any sign at all of quick movement from the shadows which would give away the intentions of a potential attacker. Even Pikachu was on high alert. After a few more minutes of walking in total silence and traveling the same way Ash had come the previous night, they eventually came to a steel door that blocked their venture from continuing. Ash was about to say something until Fuji came up beside of him and nodded towards the metal barrier. This door leads to the main chamber right outside of Hunter's sealing room. Once we enter it, I think we can all expect to encounter the 3 ghost Pokémon that serves their master so diligently. As soon as they see us, battle will most likely be unavoidable and we all must be ready for that. He looked down at Ash then. I guess your plan will begin the moment we enter this chamber, so if they do show up then you just get to the other steel door at the end of the room and do whatever you have to in order to get inside. If we're already engaged in a battle by that time then I will get away as fast as I can to come and join you. Agatha spoke aloud suddenly, for those that remain behind, stay close to me at all times. My Pokémon will be more than a match for anything we encounter in there, do you understand? Misty, Brock, Giselle and Ash nodded, with the latter answering for them all. Yeah Agatha, I understand. As soon as we get in, I'll head for the door, Ash confirmed. Agatha nodded and then Fuji slowly pushed the door open. As it opened with a loud groaning noise, the group of humans walked into the large chamber room that separated them from Hunter's own sealed-up prison. Looking around at the place he and Ash had nearly met their ends the night before, Fuji had to suppress a shiver. He then shifted his gaze ahead across the chamber and saw the steel door that held Hunter inside the room he and Agatha had trapped it inside of so many years ago. Ash himself also had a very uneasy feeling settle over his stomach since, even though he couldn't remember everything that had happened, he did have just enough memories of the night before to put him on edge and send a shiver down his own spine. Seeing the door Fuji mentioned up ahead, Ash started walking towards it, but as soon as he took one step forward, a ball of dark energy came hurtling out of the shadows at him from across the chamber. Ash saw it just in time and managed to shout a warning to everyone before jumping to the side just as the ball of energy hit the ground he had just been standing at and exploded, causing the room to shake and a cloud of smoke to shoot up into the air. Ash looked up from where he was now laying on the ground and saw 3 spectral forms emerge from the shadows. The shadowy figures eventually came into full form and Ash was able to see the wickedly grinning faces of Ghastly, Hunter and Gengar, all floating slowly towards them with the manic smiles of malice still plastered across their faces. Everyone stood up quickly as Agatha called out, "Get ready, they're sure to attack any moment now." Ash and the others hurriedly got into ready positions just as the 3 ghost types floated in front of the door, keeping their master at bay to block the way. Before anyone could say or do anything, Ghastly's eyes glowed red before a beam of red energy shot straight at them from its now scarlet eyes. Since Ash already had 2 of his Pokémon out, he shouted, "Pikachu Thunderbolt, stop that attack." Pikachu hopped from his shoulder and began sparking with electricity before crying out, "Pikachu!" and releasing a powerful bolt straight at the beam of energy. Both attacks collided in midair and fought for dominance for a few moments before exploding into a cloud of smoke that covered the room. As everyone struggled to see through the smoke, multiple balls of energy shot out of the hazy cloud straight at them, glowing with dark intent. Agatha quickly took action and threw a Pokeball up into the air. "My friend, I need your assistance. Stop those shadow balls." Out of the Elite Four members' Pokeball burst forth none other than her infamous and legendary Gengar, who took to the battle with not so much as a second of hesitance. Showing just how experienced and battle-hardened it truly was. Without a command, Gengar stood firmly rooted to the ground as its eyes glowed red and hands came out in front of it. Out of nowhere, several balls of energy started to form in front of Gengar that were small at first but quickly expanded in size. As soon as they were about the size of basketballs, Gengar unleashed them and sent its salvo flying straight at the opposing shadow balls coming for them. Gengar's shadow balls not only impacted and beat out the other 3 ghost Pokemon's own, but they actually cut right through them and continued on towards the enemy Pokemon. The smoke had cleared by now and Ghastly, Hunter and Gengar were now completely visible. Seeing the balls of energy coming towards them, the 3 ghostly beings quickly scattered as the shadow balls struck the wall behind them and caused several small explosions to rock the room. Not giving a second for a breather, they quickly separated and went towards Ash and the others at different angles. Misty and Brock saw Ghastly and Hunter coming for them both respectively and were quick to call out their own Pokémon. "Starmie, Onix, we need you." The giant rock snake Pokémon and Misty's own star-shaped Starmie appeared in bright bursts of light and were ready for action almost immediately. Misty commanded first, Starmie use water gun on Ghastly. While Brock followed with, Onyx use rock throw. Both Pokémon quickly executed their individual attacks, however, the two spectral Pokémon were fast to react. Haunter stopped and sent a beam of Nightshade energy at the large rock Onyx had thrown at it while Ghastly just phased out of existence and appeared several feet away from the jet of water intent on hitting it. Meanwhile, Gengar appeared out of the ground in front of Ash with a shadow ball already poised to strike at his stomach. Ash went to move back and try to give a command to Pikachu or Charmander, but before he could, a large rock came flying through the air and struck Gengar in the side, sending the fully evolved Pokémon hurtling back several feet away. Ash turned around in surprise and saw Giselle standing behind her Graveler as the rock type straightened up from tossing the rock. Ash smiled at her and nodded, silently thanking her for the save, to which she just waved and beamed at him in return. The moment was ruined the next moment though when Gengar, Haunter and Ghastly regrouped together and then shot twin beams of red Nightshade out of their eyes in a wide sweeping arc, intent on cutting through Ash and the others in one fell swoop. Agatha stepped up quickly and commanded her Gengar like the professional she was, "Gengar, I want you to use Curse Implosion now." Nodding at its trainer's command, Gengar leaned forward and started to strain its body as its eyes glowed red. Slowly, a dark black ball of energy began to form at Gengar's stomach before then expanding and wrapping around the Pokémon like a shield. Grunting in effort with a low, "Gengar." The black shell of energy expanded at rapid speed until it was formed a large dome that eventually extended all around Gengar, the humans and their Pokémon. If one was looking from the outside they would just see a massive cocoon of black energy surrounding everyone inside of it just as the multiple beams of Nightshade made contact with it. The moment this happened, the dome started to pulse and shift as it kept the beams of energy from penetrating it. The three wild ghost types narrowed their eyes and added more power to their individual Nightshade attacks, and this caused Gengar to grunt in effort as it added even more power to the dome in order to keep it up. Ash and his friends watched on in awe at the power of an Elite Four Pokémon just as Agatha called out, "Now Gengar, release your power." Snapping its eyes open, Gengar suddenly pulled the dome inward until it was just big enough to still cover Onyx's large body. The three ghost Pokémon grinned thinking that they had won as their Nightshade attacks started to gain more ground, but that only lasted for a second until Gengar thrust its arms out to the side and cried loudly, "Gengar AAAAARRRRRRR." Like a bomb had went off, the dome of black energy suddenly exploded outward and pushed the beams of Nightshade back. Ghastly, Haunter and Gengar went wide-eyed in fear as they tried to keep the wall of energy from reaching them by combating against it with their Nightshade attacks, but in the end, even the power of three wild Pokémon was no match for the hardened might of one trained by an Elite Four. Before they could even hope to get away, the dome of energy broke through the lances of Nightshade, shattering them into nothing as it made contact with them and then exploded with a force so great, the entire chamber rocked viciously and the ceiling shook. Ash and the others covered their eyes from the smoke that immediately filled the room and waited out the devastation until the shaking finally stopped. When they could finally see again, all of them were surprised when they found themselves unable to spot the three minions of Haunter anywhere in the entire chamber. Looking back at Agatha, Ash asked in bewilderment, "What happened to them?" The older woman just shook her head as she walked up to check on her Gengar. "They're not gone if that's what you're asking. They'll be back, trust me. That's why you need to get through that door as fast as possible." Even though Ash wanted to ask more, he just nodded his head. "Yeah, you're right." Looking down at his two Pokémon, he nodded towards the end of the chamber. "Come on guys, let's go." His Pokémon following close behind along with everyone else, Ash ran across the room and up the steps to the platform that the steel door rested upon. Examining the strange seal markings on it, he looked back at Fuji. "How do I open it?" The man just nodded towards the door. "When I found you the other night you were all but glued to the door with your energy being siphoned into it. I imagine that if you just touch it then it'll probably do the same thing and start to open up. I'll warn you though, it will most likely be painful." Ash looked at the door and then down at his hands before answering with a voice full of determination, "We've come too far to turn back now." Glancing back up at the door while his friends and Pokémon watched on nervously, Ash took a deep breath before placing his hands upon the cold metal of the door. As soon as he did, Ash felt a painful, tugging sensation as his entire body was suddenly pulled tightly against the metal. He could literally feel his very life energy getting absorbed into the door as the seals engraved into it started to glow blue and made a dull, metallic ringing sound. Ash's friends, Pokémon and the two adults watched on worriedly as the boy started to writhe and groan in pain. Ash could feel his energy beginning to wane considerably the longer he stayed stuck to the steel door, and it was only after several long minutes of suffering did it finally start to budge. As it did, Fuji and Agatha both motioned for everyone else to stand back and be ready for anything that may happen next. Giselle, Misty and Brock looked on fearfully for their friend as Ash started to groan in pain, but just as Giselle made to take a step forward, a deadly beam of red energy swiped down at her feet and cut a deep swath in the floor below them. Giselle flew back through the air with a shriek of surprise while everyone else was temporarily stunned as they stumbled back. Out of the shadows came Ghastly and its two cousins, eyes glowing with a vengeance as they returned to deal with the intruders that had violated their inner sanctity. Agatha and everyone else quickly took fighting positions with their Pokémon as the three ghosts charged them. Starmie, Graveler and Onix launched a tri-attack of water and earth at them, but the combined might of three nightshades quickly caused a stalemate to become the outcome. Agatha ran to join the fray, ordering her Gengar to use a Shadow Ball. Just as Fuji was about to join in though, she stopped him with an outstretched hand. "No. You need to stay here and be ready to enter that chamber with Ash, we've got this." The older man nodded and then watched as her Gengar became involved in a 3-on-1 Shadow Ball fight with the opposing ghost types. Quickly shaking out of his stupor, he ran over to Ash just as he noticed the door finally opening enough to slip through. Not wanting to give the beastly creature inside enough time to register what was going on and then make its escape, Fuji ran up to Ash and grabbed a hold of the nearly limp boy before yanking as hard as he could. Seeing his struggle, Pikachu and Charmander jumped in and grabbed each of their trainer's legs as they strained to pull him free from the door, but even then it still wasn't enough. Graveler dodge and use Rock Tomb. Giselle shouted as her Pokémon jumped out of the way of an incoming lick attack by Ghastly and then quickly picked up several large rocks which it hurtled at the ghost type one after the other. Looking to the side, Giselle could see Fuji and Ash's Pokémon struggling to free him from the energy-draining door, which was rapidly opening now. Seeing that they were struggling greatly, Giselle acted almost without thinking and then commanded her Pokémon to follow her before taking off across the chamber. Giselle ran straight through the heart of the battle that had now practically consumed the entire chamber. Ducking under multiple blasts of water and massive boulders that were being hurled and shot through the air respectively by Starmie and Onix as they battled it out against Hunter and Ghastly, who were proving to be more than a match for them. She also had to sidestep, roll and jump out of the way of the wayward Shadow Balls and Nightshade attacks that were raining down from high above by both Gengar as they fought viciously. Agatha's Gengar may have been more powerful, but the other one had anger and determination on its side, which allowed it to fight on a somewhat even kilter with the more experienced ghost type. Giselle was almost to the door when two Shadow Balls misfired by their casters came flying through the air at her. Giselle stopped mid-run and tried to get out of the way, but she was too close to the incoming balls of energy to do anything. However, just before she could be hit with the two powerful attacks, Graveler suddenly lunged forward and jumped in front of her, putting its arms out as it made to protect its trainer. Giselle covered her arms over her face as she prepared for the end or at the very least horrible pain, but instead, she heard a loud grunting sound followed by a large explosion. Looking ahead, she was stunned to see her Graveler standing or now wobbling actually in front of her with its arm out. Her shock still resonating within her, she didn't snap out of it until her Pokémon dropped to the ground on one knee with burn marks all over it. Crying out its name, Giselle quickly ran to Graveler and dropped to her knees as she put her arms around the rock type. "Graveler, are you okay?" The Pokémon just looked at its trainer and gave a pained smile before holding up a single thumb and nodding. "Gee Graveler, Grav." Feeling her eyes tear up at her Pokémon's dedication to protect her, she smiled and replied, "You saved me Graveler, thank you. I can never repay you for that, you deserve a good rest, please go back into your Pokéball for now." However, Graveler shook its head, body and then pointed towards the end of the chamber where Fuji was still struggling to help Ash's Pokémon get him unstuck from the door. Giselle followed her Pokémon's gaze and then looked back at Graveler, seeing the determination in its will to not give up. "You want to help Ash, don't you?" The rocky Pokémon just nodded and stood up shakily before regaining its footing. Graveler. Giselle just smiled and let a fire of her own enter her eyes before standing up. Okay, let's go. She and her Pokémon then took off towards the steel door again and managed to reach Ash in mere seconds. Stopping beside Fuji, she asked urgently, "What's wrong?" Fuji grunted in effort as he yanked on Ash again before replying, "I can't get him away from this blasted thing. The door is opening up too and we have to stop it before it opens anymore." Giselle nodded in understanding before joining them in trying to free Ash. She grabbed at his back and pulled with all her might but she couldn't even budge him. After several tugs, she pulled away and huffed. "Shit, it's not working. We need more power. We need." She then looked at her Graveler and an idea formed in her head. Looking at Fuji, she quickly instructed, "Let Ash go. All three of you, I've got a plan." Fuji and Ash's Pokémon looked at Giselle for all of a few seconds before deciding to trust her since their method was obviously not working at all. Stepping away, Giselle pointed at Ash and then commanded, "Graveler, get a running start and then rush into Ash." The rock type quickly complied and then backed up before charging towards Ash. Just before he reached him, Graveler jumped into the air and collided into the boy. The force being just enough to dislodge Ash from the energy-stealing door into the ground below. Giselle, Pikachu and Charmander ran to his side but Fuji wasted no time and glanced at the door. Already starting to see it close due to the loss of its energy source, he ran over to them and knelt down to grab hold of Ash, not really giving any mind at the moment on exactly why Haunter hadn't attempted to escape yet. "We need to get inside now before that door closes." Giselle quickly nodded in agreement and helped the old man get Ash up before making their way towards the quickly closing door as fast as they could. Seeing the metallic door closing much faster than she thought it would, Giselle looked down at Pikachu and Charmander. "Hey you two, use your attacks to keep that door open please." The two small Pokémon quickly nodded and then ran ahead before stopping and launching their attacks at the door, a bolt of electricity and strong spout of flame being the weapons of choice as they cried out, "Chook Char." Both attacks collided with the door and stalled its forward movement, though with obvious great effort. Giselle and Fuji had all the time they needed though and managed to make it to the door just in time. The brunette hurriedly called back, "Okay guys, that's enough, come on." Pikachu and Charmander promptly cut off their attacks and then ran ahead to catch up. Fuji and Giselle jumped through the small opening still presented to them, followed right behind by Pikachu and Charmander. The former's tail just managing to clear the door before it slammed shut, concealing the five of them inside one of the most dangerous places anyone could ever find themselves in. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Darkness. That was all any of them could see as the door slammed shut behind them and bathed the room in shadows. Giselle and Fuji were kneeling on the cold stone floor below them with Ash supported Betwex NST the two of them. The boy in question was still panting heavily as he tried to regain the stamina lost to him by the energy seals on the door that had been draining him for all he was worth. Giselle looked around and took in the new and rather large room they found themselves in. Even though it was dark, she was still able to see that the massive chamber was cylindrical in shape with several stone pillar-like pedestals scattered all throughout the room. The walls, floor and very high ceiling was made of stone as well, and as she looked down at the floor below her, she was able to see what appeared to be small symbols of different kinds etched into the hard surface. She couldn't make any of them out but she had a feeling that they must have been of importance in some way. Most likely the seals Fuji himself had mentioned that were meant to steal away the energy of whomever was locked inside the room permanently. Looking back down at Ash again, she gently rubbed his back. "Ash, are you okay?" The black-haired boy nodded slowly and took a deep breath. "Why yeah, I'm fine, I just need to catch my breath for a minute." He then looked up and took in his surroundings. Are we in?" Fuji nodded and answered his question, "Yes my boy, we are. This is the sealing room Agatha and I trapped Hunter inside of." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Though, I don't know where the creature could possibly be hiding in this sealed-off room nor why it didn't try to escape when the door was opening up." Giselle stood up and looked around some more. "Well, it has to be around here somewhere. You said it was extremely aggressive Mr. Fuji, so it should be here, right? Or do you think maybe the seals in this room has drained its energy to the point where it's in maybe, I don't know, like a comatose state or something?" Fuji grunted and stood up as well. No young miss, I highly doubt that. Black fog is a creature of immense power, and even powerful seals like these seals made from the energy-leeching properties of some of the strongest grass-type Pokémon that were around back in the time when these rooms were created. From what I've heard and read, would not be enough render it powerless, let alone kill it. No. He then looked from side to side. It's around here somewhere, I know it. Ash slowly stood up, Pikachu and Charmander helping to brace him by his legs, before leaning against one of the stone pedestals and looking around. This doesn't make any sense. I thought as soon as we entered this room Haunter would have. Suddenly and without any warning, the room darkened even more as the air temperature dropped several degrees. The only 3 humans in the room started to feel the hairs on the back of their necks stand up as chill bumps appeared on their arms. A thick, ominous feeling descended upon the room, and this instantly put Pikachu and Charmander on alert, the former jumping up onto a nearby pedestal as he squatted down low and began sparking his cheeks. Ash looked towards his Pokémon just as all of them were suddenly pressed down upon by some invisible force, the might of which was nearly enough to drop them to their knees. Ash could hear Fuji gasp as he tried to look up. It's here. When Ash finally managed to raise his head enough to glance ahead again, he saw, to his amazement and wonder, a black swirling vortex of shadows start to form against the wall at the far end of the chamber. As he looked on, the dark energy slowly began to expand and move outwards until it nearly consumed the entire wall behind it and covered a space almost 10 feet in front of it. Each of their eyes became glued to the ominous spectacle in front of them as, with a haunting, deep and low rumbling humming sound, the shadows slowly started to condense and take shape into an actual form. When the shape-shifting had finally completed a short time later, the 3 of them were now staring at a massive, thick, almost completely black cloud of shadows that were swirling ever so slowly at the very front of the chamber. The dark energy which was making up the shadows seemed to have a mind of its own as it twisted and turned within itself, the murky haze trailing out over the chamber room and covering everything it touched in total darkness. As he stared upon it, Ash then saw 2 large, glowing red eyes open up within the shadows of the fog as it gazed piercingly, orbs glowing with malevolence, right at he and the others. Ash knew what he was looking at, but Fuji gave voice to it first as he said in a mere ghost of a whisper. Black fog. Pikachu started to growl under his breath as his cheeks sparked more, the little Pokémon being able to feel the evil intentions the creature in front of it was now emitting in powerfully rolling waves. All directed at the humans whom were now standing in its presence. Ash heard his Pokémon growl and promptly held his hand out. Pikachu, stand down. Pikachu looked a little reluctant to do so at first, but finally nodded and obeyed his trainer just as Black Fog's eyes finally found themselves settled on Fuji. Even though the years had changed him, Haunter could still recognize the human that had imprisoned it, and as soon as it did, the creature let out a loud, screeching sound as the room shook with the fury of its anger. Fuji, for his part, didn't even flinch as he calmly spoke. Black Fog, it has been many years, hasn't it? I see the time has done little to curb your hatred and malice. Haunter's eyes narrowed until they could almost see the hate shining within the red orbs that it called eyes. Ash, not wanting anything to get out of control any sooner than it had to, stepped forward and called out to it, Haunter. Giselle and Fuji saw Haunter's eyes widen at having its naturally given name called out so boldly almost immediately. The red eyes quickly shifted onto Ash, and as it did, its eyes further widened in surprise at seeing the object of its recent obsession and potential freedom standing a mere short distance away. Ash narrowed his eyes at the corrupted Pokémon and took a second to take in the sight of the truly magnificent but also horrifying-looking creature that had been shunned and cast aside by so many over the years. What Arceus had told him of Haunter's intimidating and overpowering appearance was proven to be nothing less than absolutely true, as never before in his young career as a Pokémon trainer had Ash yet seen anything so incredible, for lack of a better word. Haunter may have been a Pokémon, yes, but like Ash's giant Dragonite and Tentacruel, it was an unfortunate freak of its species amongst the entire Pokémon world, to an extreme degree. Ash took a single step forward before speaking in a level tone, "You know who I am, don't you, Haunter?" The Pokémon's red eyes just narrowed at him in response, a hungry gleam in its eyes as the desire to suck out Ash's very life essence in order to free itself could be seen shining in its red pupils. Ash held a hand out at it then as he made a very bold, very risky statement. "I know that you want me. I know you want to use me to free yourself from this place so you can continue the destruction and chaos you caused so many innocent people in the past, but I'm not letting you. I'm here to tell you now that today, I am going to do everything in my power possible to stop this anger you feel and put an end to this cycle of hatred you constantly live in. Today, I am setting you free. Haunter's eyes blazed malevolently at Ash, and he knew in that moment that simple words wasn't going to get through to it. Not that he expected something so grandiose and maybe even a little corny sounding would reach the darkness-shrouded Pokémon. Haunter was, for all intents and purposes, completely wild and untamed. An unpredictable force of raw power that had long since lost itself to its baser instincts. A creature that would attack first and not think about what it did later. That statement was proven to be true as well for the very next moment. Haunter attacked. Ash and Fuji saw it coming first, the former rushing at Giselle with his tired legs as he pushed her to the ground. Fuji ducked behind a stone pedestal while Pikachu and Charmander both ran and hid behind another one. All of it was done just in the nick of time too, because at the very next moment, several beam-like charges of dark energy came erupting from the shadows surrounding Haunter as they made a deadly beeline straight for their targets. Ash and Giselle held their hands over their heads as the attacks impacted with the ground, walls and stone pedestals around them, loud explosions rocking the room as they hit with devastating force. Ash quickly rolled he and Giselle to a nearby pillar that hadn't been destroyed yet and tried to look through the smoke to see where Fuji and his Pokémon were. After a few seconds he was finally able to see them, hunkered down behind their own stone barriers, visibly on edge but still safe thankfully. After several more moments of the black beams of energy being released throughout the room, everything went silent. Ash poked his head up from his hiding spot and looked at Haunter just as the Pokémon gave a loud roaring, shrieking sound and the shadows around it expanded and fluctuated outward. Calling out to his companions, Ash jumped up in a flash, "We need to act now. If we don't start fighting back, we're dead." The call to action did its just job as Fuji and Giselle quickly complied. Pikachu and Charmander ran to Ash's side on his gesture just as the only other two humans in the room stood up along with him and pulled out their Pokeballs. In two flashes of light, Fuji's Misdreavus and Giselle's Graveler were called out in combat-ready battle stances as they awaited their trainer's commands. Ash knew they didn't have much time, so he made a fast command, "Remember that this is all about distraction. Do whatever you can to divert Haunter's attention so I can get close to it." Giselle and Fuji nodded before ordering their Pokémon to attack Haunter. Ash only looked long enough to see Graveler take off rolling towards Haunter and Misdreavus flying towards it while charging a shadow ball in front of its small body. Turning away then, Ash motioned for his Pokémon to follow him as he started to run towards Haunter while hiding behind the stone pedestals scattered throughout the chamber as he did so. Being extremely careful and with his eyes locked onto Haunter's massive shadowed form, he kept pressing forward, hoping and praying that Fuji and Giselle could handle the situation for now. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Misdreavus fired off a shadow ball at the wall of shadows in front of it but only succeeded in causing a minor annoyance as the ball of energy exploded on impact. Graveler rolled towards the darkness and just as he came upon it, Giselle shouted, "Graveler, use rock throw." Coming out of its roll, Graveler dug its hands into the ground and then jumped up with a large chunk of the floor in its arms. Chucking it at the cascade of swirling shadows keeping Haunter disguised, the rock flew straight and true at speeds that would definitely leave a nasty mark on anything it hit. However, like a hand extending to swat a meddlesome insect, a tendril of dark energy suddenly emerged from the shadows and slapped the chunk of floor straight down into the ground where it shattered into pieces. Several more tendrils shot out of the darkness and sped towards Misdreavus after that. Fuji yelled out to his Pokémon upon seeing the danger, "Misdreavus, don't let them touch you. Use your speed to dodge and fire as many shadow balls as you can to stay ahead." The small ghost type tried to listen to its trainer and began moving around in the air as fast as it could, zigzagging and swerving in and out of the shadow tendrils as they attempted to snatch Misdreavus into its hold. Fuji's Pokémon was quickly being overwhelmed by the seemingly never-ending swarm of tentacles coming for it though, and for each one it destroyed with a shadow ball, two more would seemingly take its place. All the while, Haunter just watched the chase take place with its red eyes glowing in sick amusement. Meanwhile, Giselle was trying to keep her Graveler from being hit by the strange blasts of shadow-type energy waves being hurled at it from the large mass of blackness dominating the front or back, depending how you looked at it, of the chamber. Giselle knew her already tired Pokémon was beginning to wear down, and being that Graveler wasn't meant for speed, it was only a matter of time before the never-ending barrage of energy waves connected with it. In fact, it was at the exact same time as Giselle prepared to give her Pokémon another command that Haunter gained the upper hand. Becoming flat-out overwhelmed by the power of the foe they were facing, Misdreavus was suddenly trapped by a group of shadow tendrils and then started getting beat ruthlessly between them until one of the arms finally smacked her away towards Fuji. At the same moment, Graveler tripped up just as it was about to hurl another slab of floor at the Veil of Shadows. This was all Haunter needed, and with a well-timed energy pulse, Graveler was struck head-on by the powerful darkness and sent sprawling across the chamber. Both it and Misdreavus both gave pained grunts of "Grav Dreavus" as they finally came to a stop on the cold stone floor. Giselle and Fuji both ran out to their Pokémon quickly and helped them as Giselle looked at Haunter with fearful eyes. What kind of attacks are those?" Fuji grit his teeth and just shook his head. "Nothing that any normal Pokémon should be able to use, that's all I know. I don't even think it can be described as a conventional type of energy source that we know of. Whatever power Haunter uses that makes up its very existence is beyond any of us. At this point I now see that the seals in this room have only repressed Haunter's power enough to keep it trapped, not weaken it any true way. We can't hope to beat it." Fuji looked at Giselle with steely eyes. "But we have to at least buy Ash the time he needs." He drew 2 more Pokeballs from his side. "We'll need to pull out all the stops for this battle, young miss, are you ready?" Giselle just looked in the direction Ash had vanished before looking back at the old man and nodding, holding up her one remaining Pokeball. "I'm with you, Mr. Fuji." The bald man smiled at her as both of their Pokémon finally stood, levitated back up. "Good, then let's give this beast all we have." Those words of encouragement said, he called out Duskull and his own Haunter, which joined their partner Misdreavus in a battle-ready formation. Giselle took point next and called out her Marowak. She knew her first Pokémon's ground-type moves would be of no effect against an otherworldly ghost type such as Haunter, but at the most, she was hoping it would at least offer a much-needed extra hand and be able to support her weary Graveler. Fuji spoke again once all of their available Pokémon was out in play. "As I'm sure you know, Ms. Giselle, a common theory is that ghost-type Pokémon attacks will not be effective against their own kind, but as I'm also sure you have already learned, this is not entirely true. Damage can be inflicted, though the amount in which is dealt is usually always so minuscule. Trainers almost never have a ghost-type against ghost-type battle. It would take far too long for either side to cause enough damage using their naturally bestowed spectral powers to warrant a sensible match-up. However," Fuji's eyes narrowed at the monstrous ghost type they were currently facing down. "Some ghost types, such as Agatha's Gengar and this Haunter before us now, are so powerful that their attacks can seriously affect those of their same species. It is my hope that by using all 3 of my own ghost types that maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to fight against Black Fog a little more effectively, hopefully." Giselle just let out a breath and got ready. "Yeah, that's gonna be a big maybe." Just as Fuji and the brunette were about to command all of their Pokémon to attack at one time, Haunter made another drastic change to the playing field in order to take any possible advantage they had away from them. Fuji and Giselle could only watch in confusion as the shadows around Haunter started to broil and shift and its eyes glowed even brighter with power practically emanating from them. A smoky haze slowly surrounded the shadows around Haunter before extending outwards. Then, to their utter shock and amazement, both humans watched as the shadows all around them, from the floor, ceiling and walls, started to actually come to life. Before their very eyes, several ghostly figures, resembling walking shadows to a degree, began emerging from not only the shroud of shadows covering Haunter but also every other area in the chamber that was hidden by darkness. The spectral forms that were slowly manifesting themselves in incredibly large numbers didn't really have any defining characteristics at all. No face, no true body shape and no voice. They neither resembled people nor Pokémon and instead looked to be just, blank puppets. Faceless dolls of darkness brought to life to serve their master as they floated eerily in the air, slowly closing upon their opponents. To say an icy chill went up the spines of Giselle, Fuji and even their Pokémon would have been a total understatement. The paranormal display of dark power being displayed before them suddenly made them all feel as though they were just extremely small, insignificant insects compared to this ancient creature of pure power that levitated before them. Mustering all the courage they had though, Fuji and Giselle pointed at the battalion of faceless shadow puppets in front of them and shouted to their Pokémon, "All of you, attack now." Fuji and Giselle's Pokémon, regardless of the fear they were feeling at the moment, nodded to their trainer's words and charged towards the incoming wave of dark beings with loud battle cries. XXXXXXXXXXXX. Ash and his Pokémon saw the creation of the shadow beings from their position behind a stone pillar near the back of the room and instantly felt the same feeling of fear and trepidation that their friends were. Once again, Ash found himself in awe of Haunter's abilities and started to see just what Arceus was saying when she told him of the unimaginable danger he was going to find himself in if he decided to encounter the dangerous Pokémon. He could hear Giselle and Fuji call out the rest of their Pokémon into the seemingly one-sided battle and then just moments later saw those same Pokémon take off in a charge towards a large group of shadow ghouls that were steadily making their way towards them. Ash continued to watch silently for a few moments as his friends' Pokémon collided with their enemies and commenced into a vicious battle with the unnerving shadow beings. As Ash heard his girlfriend and Fuji shout fast commands to their Pokémon, he watched the puppet-like creatures intently in order to find out just how they fought. To his amazement though, the ghouls didn't or simply wasn't by choice, doing much if any fighting back at all. Their movements were extremely slow and because of this, the viciously attacking Pokémon they were doing battle against were tearing through them one after the other. However, what they apparently lacked in power, the ghouls made up for in their ability to reproduce and increase in number. For each one destroyed, two more seemed to take its place and this very cycle continued as though to be endless. Knowing that he couldn't waste any more time, Ash gestured for his two Pokémon to follow him and then started moving towards Haunter again. He didn't get far though because as he came closer, several of the shadow ghouls slowly arose from the ground and stared at him with blank, glowing red eyes. Gritting his teeth, Ash came to a stop as Pikachu and Charmander jumped in front of him, ready for battle. Seeing the numbers they were up against, Ash knew he needed help and pulled out another Pokeball. Calling Ghastly out into the fight, he looked up to him quickly. "Ghastly, I need you to help me get through these things. They may not seem like much but don't underestimate them, they multiply like crazy." The Ghastly from Maiden's Peak assessed the situation and just nodded before settling into formation with Pikachu and Charmander. "Let's see what they can do then," he answered with his trademark grin in place. Ash raised his hand then and commanded, "Pikachu Thunderbolt, Charmander Flamethrower, Ghastly Nightshade." As soon as those words left his lips, his Pokémon sprung into action. Pikachu released a powerful bolt of electricity, Charmander let loose a hot jet of flames and Ghastly's eyes glowed red before a bright beam of similar colored energy shot out of them. All three attacks blasted through the air and impacted with the shadowy specters in front of them, tearing right through the ghoulish foes and impacting the wall far behind them. Ash quickly took off running the very next moment since he was afraid Haunter would find a lock on his position before he could get close enough. On he ran, as fast as he could towards his objective, no longer bothering to hide. Along the way, several more ghouls started to appear which his three Pokémon quickly attacked and took care of. However, as Ash drew closer and closer towards Haunter, who was currently being preoccupied with sending its servants out to fight Giselle and Fuji's Pokémon, the ghouls became increasingly more prevalent number and actually started to show aggression. They had no sort of energy-based attacks but Ash could see them starting to fly faster through the air before zooming down at him with their hands extended, obviously meaning to do him harm of some kind. For his part though, Ash had some extremely persistent protectors who stayed on his six at all times. Pikachu, Charmander and Ghastly formed a sort of circle around Ash and lashed out at anything that came even close to him. Something he was thankful for since the ghouls' aggressiveness wasn't the only thing that was changing. He could see them starting to actually physically change until he noticed shadowy claws and sharp teeth become added to their forms, leaving no more doubt in his mind that they were now most definitely dangerous. Ash was almost upon Haunter, just mere feet away from the shroud of shadows that surrounded it. Just as he was about to try and enter into the dark void though, a much larger than normal ghoul came charging at him through the air with a deadly gleam in its eyes, shadow claws extended as it came for him. Ash stopped and held his hands up in front of him just as Pikachu came jumping in front of him while shouting, "Chew!" and launching a bolt of lightning at the incoming enemy which struck it head on and caused its eyes to bug out before it exploded in a haze of darkness. Nodding his thanks to Pikachu, Ash ran towards the shadows and just before he reached them he extended his right hand and focused on the mark Arceus had bestowed upon him. Recalling that he just needing to focus on making it appear, Ash scrunched his brow up tightly and grunted with effort just as he passed through the veil of darkness. The only thing Ash knew from that moment on was the feeling of blackness overtaking his vision, the surprised expression of Haunter's red eyes as it turned its attention inward to look at the intruder within its domain and the sudden bright light that accompanied the intricate star mark as it appeared on his palm. After that, he fell into nothingness. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Floating. That was the sensation Ash felt when he awoke. Well, awoke wasn't really the right word. He felt the same feeling he did all the other times things when this odd and very strange experience happened to him. When he opened his eyes, he found that he was indeed floating, and not only that, but he was also floating in the exact same strange place that he had every time he accidentally activated his star mark in the past. The only difference between those times before and now though was that he actually knew what was going on, and given how Arceus always teleported him to her own little dimensional plane when she needed to speak with him, his sharp mind made the instant connection that whenever the star mark activated, he and the Pokémon he was being connected to were apparently getting transported in an out-of-body experience to a small pocket dimension similar to the ones that Arceus routinely used. Looking at the colorful realm around him then, Ash took a moment to admire the usual multitude of bright, wispy colors floating throughout the abnormal space before fixing his gaze forward. What drew his attention so quickly was the sight of a large mass of swirling black shadows stretching far above him just a short distance away, with glowing red eyes staring piercingly at him from within the dark shroud. Ash knew instantly who he was looking at and had undefinable confirmation then and there that the connection had been successful. Taking a second to look Haunter over, Ash could just make out an even darker shade of pitch black energy enveloping the already darkness-covered Pokémon. From what Arceus told him of the different colors of energy he would see when he was sent into this pocket dimension created by the star mark, he was finally able to tell what they meant. He knew that the colors represented what particular emotion the Pokémon in question was experiencing, and he also knew that red was the aura he would see when they were really mad. What he was seeing now though was an aura color that he remembered Arceus telling him was the worst of all. An energy signature that a Pokémon would become consumed by only when all of their hope, compassion, love and happiness had been ripped away. Being replaced by only darkness, hatred and pure desolation. He could still hear her telling him that Pokémon in this state of aura control was all but beyond hope, completely consumed by their pain and hate. By looking at Haunter's pitch black aura, he could now for the first time clearly see just how lost to darkness this poor, broken and miserable Pokémon really was. Though, instead of feeling hopelessness, call him crazy, Ash instead felt an even stronger sense of desire and need to help Haunter become free of its long repressive bonds of loneliness and sorrow. To help show it the light and bring a new sense of being and life to its existence. Feeling his determination strengthen even more so now than almost any other time before, Ash spoke to Haunter in a loud, clear and firm voice telepathically, reaching out with his emotions towards the Pokémon all the while. Haunter, I. Those were the only words he managed to mentally get out, however, because at the exact same second that his flow of positive emotions came in contact with the wall of black energy surrounding Haunter, he then felt an extremely powerful repulsion of resistance that broke through his own emotions and came hurtling at him like a speeding Pidgeot. As soon as the dense concentration of negative, resilient emotions hit Ash, he felt everything go black around him, followed by the sensation of being sucked backwards. Then, everything went black again. XXXXXXXXXXX. Ash came to as he suddenly found himself being flung through the air across the chamber before hitting one of the large stone pillars, gasping in shock and pain as he did and then falling down to the ground afterwards. Around him, his three Pokémon who were close to the shadows surrounding Haunter when Ash made the connection, had been tossed through the air as well and landed in a heap beside him. Giselle and Fuji saw what happened and quickly ran to his side while Ash struggled to get up. Ash! Giselle shouted fearfully as she reached his side and knelt down next to him. What happened? Are you okay? The boy just grunted in pain and shifted around a little. Yeah, I'm fine. Are my Pokémon alright? Giselle glanced behind her and saw Fuji looking Pikachu, Charmander and Ghastly over. They all looked fine, only a little shaken up from the sudden shock of being flung through the air like rag dolls. Looking back at Ash, she nodded and started to look him over as well. They're fine, Ash. Arceus, what happened? He sat up fully and took a few deep breaths before answering her. I made connection with Haunter, but I underestimated the strength and intensity of the hatred and pain inside of it. It was like a giant wall made of solid steel that was so thick and impenetrable I could even tap at it before I was expelled from the connection. It was insane. He stood up fully then, slowly, as he looked forward and saw the shadows surrounding Haunter starting to expand as the Pokémon's eyes glowed redder with even more malice and fury. In a quick outward thrust, the shadows around it seemed to develop a will of their own before exploding outwards in multiple dark energy blasts, the likes of which struck each of Giselle and Fuji's Pokémon and sent them tumbling back across the chamber. Ash and his two companions watched with worry and fear as the Pokémon cried out in pain upon getting struck head-on with the powerful attacks. They tumbled across the room, cratering the floor and smashing through multiple stone pedestals before coming to a stop near Ash and the others. Giselle and Fuji quickly ran to their Pokémon's sides and started checking them over fretfully while Ash leaned against the pillar behind him and looked towards Haunter again. It was easy to tell from the way Haunter's eyes were narrowed in rage, the way the shadows around it were furiously swirling about, and also from how the number of shadow ghouls protecting their master seemed to multiply greatly, that Ash's attempt at reaching Haunter had only angered the Pokémon all that much more. Clenching his fists in frustration, Ash shook his head. Damn. This isn't gonna work, we need to try something else. He looked down at his own Pokémon, who still looked ready to do whatever he commanded at a moment's notice, and then at Giselle and Fuji. Their Pokémon seemed much more worse for wear than his after getting hit by those powerful energy blasts, but he knew they would keep going if their trainers wanted them to do so. Stepping forward, he said calmly, "Listen, you two, this is getting a lot more dangerous than I originally thought. You don't have to do anything more, your Pokémon are hurt and I'm sorry for that. I'm going to try something else, but neither of you need to help me any further. I'm sorry for bringing this upon you, maybe Agatha was right and this really was a dumb idea." Silence reigned for several seconds until Ash felt a hand on his shoulder. Looking up, he saw Fuji smiling down at him. "Ash, I can't tell you how today will turn out. Maybe we will succeed and maybe we won't, but whatever happens, I want you to know that this was not a dumb idea. Your compassion and feelings of mercy for Haunter is a good thing which I doubt anyone else, even myself before today, would have shown. Yes, things seem bleak right now, but things will always seem the darkest before the dawn. Know that I am with you right now through whatever happens." Giselle took Ash's right hand and smiled warmly at him. "So am I, Ash. I'm not going to abandon you. That Pokémon, not creature or monster, needs our help and someone to show it some love. I'll help you do that however I can because I'm with you no matter what." As soon as those words were said, Giselle and Fuji's Pokémon all came to stand around them and smiled, or at least kindly looked at him for those that couldn't make the proper facial movements to smile like the ghost types, in a reassuring manner. Ash's own Pokémon joined in and looked at their trainer with belief and determination radiating in their eyes. Ash for his part felt incredibly touched by everyone's sentiments and smiled gratefully at them. "Thank you, all of you. I've said it before but without the people." He leaned down to rub Charmander and Pikachu's heads while smiling at Ghastly. "And Pokémon that care for me and always stand by my side.